Okay, let's have a sample game showing how the block movement system rules are utilized to get the Prussians and the Austrians here into combat. As you've seen before, we have the Austrians on the right side of your screen and the Prussians are on your left side of the screen. Each side, I have started the game with having a halfpenny marked on each and every block because our table width is less than 6 feet. That's a recommendation for game setup. We had a die off and the Prussians won the right to move first. Starting on the Prussian left flank, I'm going to take my Prussian cavalry division here on the hill, and it's going to physically move forward one full grid square. Bear in mind, this cavalry is in battle, indicated by the officer, but cavalry moving forward has a movement allowance of 1 movement point, so consequently you can fully enter into the square, and I remove the excess movement counter. Coming over to my next command, this Prussian landwehr or reservist division, brigade, has already got a half movement point on its block. And the command is in battle. So I'm going to want to bring it forward. It will cost me 1 movement point, which is allowed to do, because it's going to get 1 half movement point for this turn, plus the half it already has saved. So consequently, this block will move forward. It's 1 square. And I'll take off the excess movement. Headquarters is going to deploy its headquarters base, so I'll come back and put those figures on in a moment. This brigade, note, is in strategic, so it's got 1.5 movement points, and I wish to move it diagonally out into this open flats area. So how I'm going to do that, grab the block, move it diagonally, put it in the center of the square, take off the excess movement, and remember we've got this extension marker here, it's also going to move diagonally as such. So the Prussian movement is all done. The only thing I have left to do is deploy my headquarters. I have deployed the Prussian headquarters, the senior officer, his headquarters base, and his 2 ADCs / scouts. With that being done, now I have to do the sighting reports. First I'll do the Prussians' viewpoint. From the senior's officer, scanning back, I put out the letter codes, what you can see, for a Chart 5 visibility, which is a typical normal cloudy day battlefield, things of that nature. Well, there's no enemy in box A or B, or the C's or the things. He can certainly see his own troops. D's. That one's a D. But D is no report, no sighting, nothing. So he's not going to get any information out of that one. Same thing with the square adjacent. But we have a C report here, and another D. Okay, the Austrian player would declare in that particular grid that that's a real sighting. No other information to be given. The Prussian player is going to have to ponder what those 2 blocks represent, but he has a strong suspicion that's probably a headquarters. Now I'll change the viewpoint from the Austrian commander's point of view. Okay, I place for game convenience the Austrian command stand and their ADCs on the actual tabletop. Even though a commander's base is not necessarily deployed on the tabletop, as long as a player declares that there's an actual real senior level officer on that field, you can utilize the scouting capabilities of the block. But that's sort of a giveaway of information, so some players might not want to do it. But from the Austrian point of view, this is their scouting report. Well, coming on straight forward, he gets a B report from this Prussian block that came forward, a C report up on the hill, and the last Prussian block on the right, the Prussian right flank, or the Austrian left, is a D. So there's going to be no report here. But a B report, the Prussian player will tell to the Austrian player it's a real unit, and it's got 9 battalions of infantry, 2 batteries of artillery, no cavalry. The C report will come in as being a real unit. No other information would be given. But one thing the Austrian player can notify or understand is because there's an officer on top of this block, he has to presume that these blocks are in battle mode. But you can put a dummy unit into battle. This doesn't make any difference. So that ends the turn scouting report. The Austrian knows he's faced by somebody directly in front, and he will plan his moves accordingly. Okay, with the Prussian half of the turn done, it's now time for the Austrian half of the turn, basically the second half of the first turn. Austrian commanders are thinking it over, and they've elected they're going to take their cavalry division on the right flank and bring it forward one square straight. Again, it's got a half movement point already saved up from the start of the game, but being cavalry, it's got a one movement point being in battle, so there's no problem coming forward to this near square. As such. Notice this is going to put us into adjacency, or an adjacent square, with the Prussian unit up on the hill. So we know definitely that these commands are going to be probably put down on the next in this movement segment. This Austrian infantry division in the middle, since it already has a half point saved up, is going to put itself forward one square. And we come over and get the extension marker as such. The Austrians are going to deploy their headquarters. And they have a couple of core artillery batteries attached to this headquarters too. I'll pull those in a moment. The Grenadiers here are going to stay still. They're going to save up a half a penny, because they want to go diagonally over here. And last but least, we have the Austrian lights. And they're going to come forward, and at the same time, they're going to expand out down into this quadrant here. So, they're half penny already on the block. They brought themselves forward, and they wanted to extend out into this square here. Notice how I placed the arrow marker pointing at the block which they're extending from. That completes the Austrian movement. Now, first things off, we're obviously going to have deployment issues here, because we've got blocks in adjacent squares which are A sidings, so that's almost mandatory put down. Within charge reach, within ability to charge, able to fire upon each other, things of that nature. So I'm going to be putting these respective commands down. In addition, on this side, we also have commands to put down. But here we have an issue. Notice that these Austrians are in good order and ready for battle. But this Prussian block is still in strategic. So I'll make note of that in a moment. The Prussians have placed their units first, since they were the non-phasing player. So as you can see, their cavalry, their infantry brigade in the middle, corps headquarters, and this brigade on the far right flank of the Prussians is all being deployed. Conversely, the Austrians, after the Prussians have deployed, have placed their figures on the board. So we have the light cavalry brigade or division, the line division in the center, corps artillery near the headquarters, and the line cavalry. This game basically is ready to go. There's not much left to be done. Artillery fire can soon commence, and the charges and the musketry actions will soon follow. This is a typical game. As you can see, the block movement system was very rapid. And that's typical, because this is a very narrow, in-depth battlefield. It's only 4 feet. Typically we use 6, so there usually might be 1 or 2 more turns before the actual first units are actually placed on the board. Who knows who will win this game? But at this point in time, it's anybody's guess. One last comment. I made note that the Prussians were going to have some form of strategic morale disorder issue, because the Austrians here were in battle order, while the Prussians had to deploy in strategic order. That means they started in a morale disorder state and had to be in column, guns limbered, no skirmishers, things of that nature, and no squares. Well, the next move is going to be the Prussians, and most likely they're just going to stand perfectly still and go into battle. So at the end of the movement phase, they'll be in good order. But they'll still be in columns. But since their threat is quite minimal, it's only basically this regiment of cavalry and a battery, they can probably get away with it. Under normal circumstances, though, this is foolhardy for a typical player to do. You don't deploy in the face of the enemy, literally.